guys, it's Bella, the Maker Mama Boss Lady behind Bella's Custom Crochets, and today we're talking wet blocking. If that sounds like nonsense to you, don't worry. I'm going to walk you through all the steps, but basically it's a way of taking your finished crochet or knit items to the next level. It's a final finishing touch that really just makes them look all that more awesome. So let me show you what we're going to need, and then I'll walk you through step by step in greater detail. First off, you need something you made. This is a crochet shawl design that I'm working on, and it's got a lot of like lacy bits that are going to really benefit from just being opened up and relaxed by blocking, but this applies to garments, socks, hats, anything that you've made out of basically any fiber. I'm going to walk you through how different fibers behave a little bit, but yeah, something you made. So grab a recently finished object. You're also going to need a blocking board of some sort. This is not really for knitting or crocheting. This is for high impact exercise or for like putting on basement floors. But this came in like a pack of 4 from Aldi for like $10 a couple years ago. I have a couple packs of them and they're great because they interlock and I can kind of shape it to the shape that I need. But there are boards made specifically for blocking. They might be a little more expensive, but you can get those on Amazon. I will try and link all of the resources below. If I can't find the specific ones, I'll link something similar. But basically you need some sort of foamy, cushy object to pin into. I'll give you some things that you can sub in as well once we get to that point. You're going to need a towel. I like to use a beach towel just because it's a little bit bigger and I can fit more shawl in it than a regular old bath towel, but towel of some kind. I can't show you, but we're going to need a sink and we're going to need some warm water. You could use a basin or a tub or a bucket, or you need something to hold some warm water to submerge your item in. We're going to need some sort of pins. These are knit blockers from Knitter's Pride. They are basically pins stuck in a little comb. So all the pins are in a nice straight line. It's great for getting good straight edges. But if you don't have these, you can use regular sewing pins or T-pins. I'll talk about that when we get to the pinning point. You might also want something to measure with. You might not need this if you have the legitimate blocking mats that have the grid marks on them for measuring, but I don't have that obviously. So if you wanted to make sure like 2 sleeves were the same length, or you were trying to get to a specific size as laid out in a pattern, you might want something to measure with. And then lastly, you might want, this is a little bar of wool wash. It's a little sample from Woolen & Co. But you can get liquid versions like Soak or Eucalan. Basically it's just like a little conditioner kind of for natural fibers. Not necessary, but a nice added touch. It makes it smell pretty, makes all your fibers real happy. So without further ado, let me walk you through the steps of how I personally like to block all of my finished objects. You guys ready? Here we go. Alright, so we're at the wet point of wet blocking. I'm going to fill up the sink with some warmish water. You don't want to do hot because if you're working with something like wool, you could accidentally felt it, and you don't want to do cold because sticking your hand in cold water is gross. So yeah, just fill it up with, comfortably warm water. It could be a bucket, a tub, a basin, a pan, whatever you got, but the sink works easiest for me. And I'm going to add a little bit of my wool wash. That word is so hard to say. That's 2 words and they're both hard. Into the water. It doesn't need to be like super bubbly and sudsy like a bath. Just a little bit. Wool wash is basically like a all-in-one shampoo and conditioner for your natural fibers. And it, besides being all sorts of good, it's got like coconut oil and I don't know, good stuff that's gonna make your fibers happy, but it also contains, this one specifically contains lanolin, which is naturally found in wool. The fiber that I'm using is actually alpaca and some cotton, hemp, and other plant fibers, but if you're working with a wool, this is gonna put some of the natural lanolin back into it and take out any oils from your hands being in there, and it makes it smell pretty. So it's a good added step if you have some. So I'm gonna run this, put a little bit of soap in, and get it submerged. Alright, you just need enough water to be able to fully submerge whatever object you're working with. It depends on, the size of the object. But now we're going to take our crochet shawl and we're going to put it into our, as you can see, it's not sudsy at all, but I promise the soap is in there. It smells great. And submerge our shawl. It's a little scary, but don't worry, it's going to be okay. We're going to be real gentle with it because it's just going to be in a real fragile state. You want to just push it down gently. Make sure that all of the fibers are thoroughly soaked. You want to get out any bubbles. Do not ever ever at any point pick it up and stretch it. That will stretch it out of shape, and we basically just want to be as gentle. This is like a spa day for your crochet or knit item. Real gentle, just patting it down, no squeezing, no wringing, no stretching, no pulling, just being super gentle. So anything you do to this is going to change the shape of it, which is what we're going for, but you don't want to be rough with it. It's having a hard time, and it just needs to be treated with some care. I do want to mention here, you can see that I have basically a bazillion ends on the shawl. More ends than normal because I made the shawl a different shape at first and then frogged it and made it into this shape, so there's a lot of extra ends. But a lot of tutorials that I've seen, they say sew in your ends first, and I've heard differing things on that. I'm just going to keep patting my shawl and getting the bubbles out while I tell you about this. But my theory for not sewing in the ends, it's kind of annoying because they do get kind of spaghetti tangled on you. But I think that if the whole premise of blocking is that we're going to change the shape and make it grow a little bit gently, that it doesn't make sense to sew in the ends and then change the shape, because that could create pulling or it could cause some of the ends to come loose. So I don't know, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like if I were to sew a pocket onto a sweater or something, I would block it first and then sew the pocket, because you wouldn't want there to be any weird pulley bits. So I always wait and sew my ends in at the end, but you can deal with your ends at your own discretion, I guess. So basically, once you have it submerged, you're going to let it hang out in here for 30 minutes or so. It doesn't have to be like set a timer, real prompt or anything. You want to make sure it has thoroughly soaked through and just gets real relaxed on its little spa day. If you leave it too long or even overnight, there's not really anything detrimental that's going to occur. Just let it relax, and we'll come back and revisit it shortly. Bye, shawl. Have fun chilling out. All right, so at this point, our shawl has had a nice, luxurious bath. It's just living its best life, feeling super relaxed. So we're gonna drain it. You can read the specific instructions on your wool wash, but most of them are made to be no rinse, so you don't need to scrub it and rinse it out, because again, we're trying to not pull anything. So I'm gonna make some drain noise. Here we go. Whoosh. And then remembering that we're being ever so gentle and ever so careful with our shawl, we're gonna just pick it up real kind and kind of press some of the water. Again, you don't want to wring it, you don't want to pick it up and stretch it. Just get as much of the excess water out as you can while being just so nice to the shawl. So this is just less water you're going to have to press out with a towel later. Give it a real good press and kind of fold it over on itself. This will be a good spot to mention that different fibers are going to react differently to blocking. Like I said, this is an alpaca, which is known to grow a whole bunch. It's alpaca and it has cotton and hemp and nettle, different plant-based fibers. But if you're looking for specifics on how to block a certain fiber, I would suggest Googling like how to wet block superwash merino, how to wet block mohair, because they're all going to kind of behave a little bit different. You can block synthetics like acrylic. I usually don't do it if I'm blocking like a hat or something tiny like that, but I have blocked acrylic garments. You're not going to get as much shaping out of it just because the man-made fibers don't really change shape. They kind of hold their shape, but you can still benefit from blocking just about anything. All right, so once we have this pressed out as much as we can, I'm going to flop it into this towel over here, and we're going to bring it into my office and continue with our blocking process. So now I have carried it gently onto my towel, and we're going to, again, gently, not pulling anything, lay it out as flat as we can sort of get it. It's upside down, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Gently on the towel, and we're going to, it might not all fit because the shawl is super long, but we're going to put as much of it as we can, nice and flat. And then we're going to kind of roll it up in the towel and squish out some more water. Again, we're not wringing it out, so I just like to fold, I don't know, maybe that's like 5-6 inches over on itself, trapping the shawl in the towel. nice little shawl burrito. Not gonna fold it that way because that would bend it all out of shape. Just gonna leave it flat, and then you can either press on it with your hands. I like to walk on it because I feel like that gets the most moisture out. Keep in mind that if you do this in your socks, they're gonna be wet. So I have shoes on. And then we're just gonna do a little dance on top of the shawl to press out any extra water, because it's already going to take a little while to dry. So as much water as we can get out of there as possible. That's probably pretty good. Just want to get out as much water as you can. So now we're going to reverse burrito it. Being real gentle still. And flop the shawl. I kind of did this upside down. We're going to get it out of the towel one way or another, but I should have rolled it the other way. But it's okay. All right, so get that damp towel out of here. So now we have a moistened shawl. This is where we're going to start pinning. Again, my ends are wild, but I think it's worthwhile to leave them that way. I have my blocking mats set up, or my, exercise mats. If you don't have these, like I said, you can substitute, maybe if you have like those ABC blocks in your kids' playroom, the foam ones that click together on the floor. Those will work great. If you don't have any sort of foamy blocky thing, you can use maybe a couple yoga mats on top of each other. You could even just use a couple, not the wet towel, but a couple more dry towels stacked up on top of each other, or a really thick blanket. But the foam is nice because it doesn't hold on to any excess moisture. If you're doing it on top of towels, it might take longer to dry. But really, whatever you can pin into. All right, so I have it laid mostly flat. And as you can see, I kind of arranged my tiles into a shawlish shape. What's nice about the interlocking ones is that you can shape it to the shape you need. So I'm going to go grab my pins over here. Like I said, I'm going to mostly be using these knit blockers because it's nice to get straight lines, but you could also use regular old pins. You could use T-pins. You could even use like rocks or heavy objects if you didn't have something to pin things down, but I feel like that's pretty accessible and cheap to get. All right, so now we're just going to kind of spread it out into the shape that we want. Again, not pulling, just real gentle. Theme of this video, again, not pulling. You can see that the lace has opened up just a little bit and it looks ever so more elegant. If you were doing a garment where you needed specific measurements, this is where the measuring tape or the little square measuring grid would come in, but the shawl, I just need it to be a straight triangle, so I'm not going to fuss too much with measurements. We're just going to start sticking. I guess we'll start in the top middle here. And you just put these along the edge and stick them in. I'm going to do the top edge and I'm going to do the bottom point, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to get the point looking real tidy. And the pins aren't going to do any damage to the shawl. It's just going to hold it in place while they dry. Okay, so I'm going to just work my way along the edge. You don't need to put them right next to each other, maybe every few inches, depending on how big your object is. And yeah, we're going to get it all pinned down and straightened out and looking its best. It's worth mentioning that while you're blocking, it doesn't so much apply to a shawl because I mostly just need it to be a giant triangle. But if you're doing something like a sweater and maybe you needed a little more room around like the underarms, or maybe you wanted to get a little bit more length, you can gently stretch to grow it into shape. But again, you just don't pull. Be nice to it. It's in a fragile state. I'm not very precise about this. You could definitely get out your measuring tape and make sure that it's all just ever so straight, but I've never made a straight line in my life, so you don't have to be too particular, or you can be as particular as you want. Up to you. This is my shawl and my video, so I'm going to do it how I like. I'm going to run out of these blockers, so I'm probably just going to use some pins across the top just to make sure that top edge behaves itself. We're going to start subbing in pins. And the pins I like to do every few inches. I have learned that if you have pets, you want to make sure you're doing this in a room that's closed, because my cat thinks it's just such a fun game to come and pull the pins out with his teeth and try and die. So yeah, we make sure we're doing this in a closed room, and again, I have a toddler, so we don't involve her in this process. That's event one, we don't want him. And you're going to need to leave this for probably at least 24 hours to dry out, depending on the temperature of your house and the weather and a couple different factors. So just make sure it's somewhere that it's not going to be like on your dining room table or something that you're going to need access to right away. And I know it's kind of a long and tedious process, but I promise it's going to be worth it. You've already spent this much time making the beautiful thing. You can see that the edge doesn't come out as good with the regular pens. It's okay. You've already spent so much time making the garment object. This is just a really good extra step to get real top quality out of your makes. So I have it mostly in a straight triangle-ish shape. I might step just a little bit, but overall, I think you get the point. Put in your pins, and then you just let it sit. If you have a room that has a ceiling fan or any kind of window you could open, adding a little bit of ventilation helps it dry faster. Overall, this is not a process that you can rush. It has to dry. You can't wear it when it's wet. So if this is something that you're planning on wearing the shawl tonight, tough luck. But this is really the best way to dry it. You don't want to hang it up over like a hanger or a garment rack, because again, that's going to create the stretching and the pulling from the weight of the fabric. So we're just going to let it sit and dry, and we'll come back and talk about it when it's done. So this has been drying for 24 hours or so. Now I'm just going to pull the pins out, and then we'll have a hopefully neatly blocked shawl. The shawl is looking great. I'm going to go grab a tape measure just to compare the measurements that I had before I blocked it, just to see how much it's grown, but it's definitely opened up a whole bunch, and the stripes and all of the little lacy bits are looking great. And yeah, I'm very happy with it, other than the fact I have to sew in a zillion ends. So obviously, this is going to look a whole lot better when all the ends are sewn in, but now it's nice and open and drapey and just so lovely. I hope this has encouraged you to try blocking your finished items. Again, if you're going to take the time to hand make something, you might as well finish it off nicely, right? And this really just brings it to the next level. I will make sure to drop all resources down below, as well as information on the shawl pattern. It's not ready yet, but by the time the video goes up, it's probably in testing and will be coming soon. I have to go sew in about 1,000,007 ends. But until I see you next time, I hope that you give this video a like, maybe give the channel a subscribe if you like this tutorial or are interested in more crochet fiber related tutorials. I also have a podcast, and you can find anything else that you want to know about me down below in the down bar. Thank you for coming, and until I talk to you next time, happy making, my friends. Bye!